Hi, welcome to my review of Jeepers Creepers Reborn. So I finally got round to seeing this movie. I had originally planned to go and see this one in cinemas to review it, but on the initial release of those reviews saying it was absolutely dreadful, my only option to see this in a cinema was to do a 2-hour round trip to Bluewater late on a Monday night, and I just simply couldn't justify the time and money to do that, to see a film that I actively knew was going to be terrible. I've waited for it to come to streaming, and now that I've finally seen it, intrigue got the better of me, and I've seen it now, and it is absolutely as bad as everybody has made it out to be. And I am a fan of this franchise overall. The first two films I actually think are pretty decent. The first one I saw when I was very young. It was one of the first sort of adult horror movies that I ever saw, and I thought it was really quite scary, and I think it worked on a lot of levels. It was quite a unique story. I thought it was well directed. I really liked the characters, and it's a movie that I've revisited a number of times throughout my life. And I've seen the second one a number of times as well. I also think that one's a really entertaining film and has a lot of good moments. The third one, however, really dropped the ball, and I thought it was just a terribly made film. I thought the story was awful, the production value was awful, the characters were awful. So I had hopes with this new Jeepers Creepers adaptation with a new director. Maybe they would at least be able to do a better job than that third film. And unfortunately, I have to say this one is even another step down from that. This is not only the worst film I've seen this year, it's probably the worst film I've seen for the last 5 years. There is literally so much wrong with this film that if I was going to talk about every single thing they messed up here, we'd be here all day. There is literally not a shred of competency to be found throughout the entire runtime of Jeepers Creepers Reborn. It fails on every single level. So I'm basically just going to try and summarize my thoughts on the main points about this, about the film, which makes it ultimately a complete failure. The script for this is absolutely atrocious. I feel like they had one of two choices here, really, where either you go into maybe like an origin story for the creeper, or go into talking about more of the lore behind it, and tell us something new that we haven't learned in the story before that really adds to it. Or if they wanted to just play it safe, just make sure they had a really solid script and another situation like the bus in the second film, where the creeper is attacking these people for individual reasons, and just play out an entertaining movie. But this does neither of these things. It basically sets it up like a cheap slasher, where the creeper is just taking people out one by one in an escape room for no apparent reason. And it goes against all of the setup they have done in the previous movies. It was a terrible idea for a story, and it really doesn't work here. The only other thing we get in terms of plot development is our main character Lane ends up having all of these psychic visions, like what they've done in previous films, where a character will have all these visions of things that have gone before, or are going to happen, and maybe explain some little details about the creeper and what's going on. But here they've got this kind of cult ritual thing going on. You know, the usual thing where you have people rounding torches, pouring blood on each other, all that sort of stuff. And it's just completely unexplained. The scenes play out, and it seems completely inconsequential to anything that happens after this. I have no idea why the director chose to include that here, because it didn't add anything to the story. It just leaves us confused, because they make no effort to actually explain how this fits into the story with the creeper and the characters that we're given here. The effects work here is absolutely shocking. It feels like the director decided to have so many of these scenes play out using like a 3D green screen background, rather than using any kind of natural scenery, which makes everything look extremely unnatural and really out of place. It's actually just distracting to look at in most of these scenes, especially when you've got somewhere like a woods or a cemetery here that you can see is very clearly this cheap green screen effect. And it's like, I don't really understand this, because they had at least a few millions into the budget of this. I mean, how expensive can it really be to go out into a field or into the woods, or just like on an empty paths and stuff like that, and do a bit of filming. I don't know why, even in somewhere like an empty cemetery, like a small cemetery, they would have to use this great big ridiculous effect. I can't understand that. You can see that basically all of this film has been shot in a studio and it looks absolutely horrendous. The lighting as well is just awful here. You've got in every scene pretty much this really over the top artificial lighting on everyone. So even when it's in the dead of night, you can see characters have these like really bright glistens coming off of their faces. You can see they're clearly standing right next to these great big studio lights, and it just looks absolutely ridiculous. I have no idea how the director didn't watch these back and think, like, does this actually look natural in any way whatsoever, and just turn it down a bit. It looks terrible. The dialogue and acting here, wow, it is unbelievably bad. I can't believe that anybody here is a trained actor. I don't know whether they just knew this movie was going to be horrible, so they weren't trying or weren't taking it seriously, but there is actually no chemistry or connection between a single one of these characters in the story. You are not convinced, and you can't buy into a single one of the interactions between these characters. Like the main couple we're following, there is no way these two are together. I'm not buying for 1 second that this couple are interested in each other. The film does absolutely nothing to show me any of the kind of attraction they have between each other or the fact that they get on. There is nothing there. They're completely different people. They have no meaningful interactions whatsoever. They've got this horrible stilted dialogue, and it is just absolutely embarrassing to watch. A lot of the lines of dialogue here are just laughable. You've got these two characters when they're doing that sort of like cosplay dress up ready for this festival. Some of the lines the guy comes out with at the end about his t-shirt were just cringe inducing to watch. Again, no idea what they were thinking when they ended up writing those lines of dialogue, because they just sound absolutely ridiculous. And then you've got other ridiculous lines that come out that seem even more funny because of the fact that nobody's kind of calling them out on it. Like there's one particular scene where the group of them, before they get to this escape room, one of the friends, there's all this commotion that happens in the cemetery and one of them has been taken, and then minutes later they find kind of like his mangled body on the floor, and one of them comments on the fact that all his wounds are still fresh. It's like, what do you mean? Like, the guy was with you alive 5 minutes ago. Of course his wounds are fresh. And it's just ridiculous lines like this. That again, nobody's kind of proof gone over this and checked whether any of it makes sense, and nobody kind of calls it out. Everyone just goes along in the film like it's normal. So you can get a good laugh out of it, but it is embarrassingly bad dialogue. That final line that Lane comes out with at the end when she kills the creeper, I can't even bring myself to say it. It was so bad. I genuinely felt sorry for and embarrassed for the actress having to say that line of dialogue. One thing that did get a laugh out of me in this movie was the horror festival they're going to, kind of like the set design for it, and the fact that there's only about 20 people there. I know the director said they had some trouble making this because of the constraints of COVID, but you would have thought that they would have at least tweaked that and cut this part out of the story, or just limited the shots to make it a little bit more subtle to kind of cover up the fact that there's clearly barely anyone there. But for some reason they don't decide to do that. There's loads of shots looking around at this big open area where there's just like 5 people walking about, and there's even some shots where they've reused the same character. Like you can see somebody's in some fancy dress costume in one scene, and they'll be in another location and they're in that shot as well, just to kind of fill it out and make it look more busy than it actually is. Absolutely ridiculous. So my overall thoughts, this is a shockingly bad entry in the Jeepers Creepers franchise. Now I see a lot of films, I see a lot of bad films, a lot of bad, cheap horror, but it's actually so rare that I'm able to watch a whole film where I genuinely don't think there's anything about it to recommend. Usually by the end of it, there's always something in there that was entertaining, or something that shows someone on board the project actually did care about what they were making or what they were trying to get across. This is not the case with Jeepers Creepers Reborn. This thing is an absolute train wreck from start to finish. It's weird as well because leading up to this movie, I was reading a bit about the director's blog, and he seemed like quite a normal guy. He was kind of posting updates about the production of this film, speaking about it quite normally, like, yep, just wrapping up this good film I've been making. He didn't seem like this kind of bizarre guy just having a go at making a movie. He sounded like he was quite competent in the way he was talking about the production of this. So I have absolutely no idea what he thinks about the final result of what he got here. I guess it's always hard to tell with a really bad movie who was responsible for it. Is it the script? Is it the effects, the budget, the director? I don't know. I don't know who entirely was responsible, but somebody definitely fucked up here because this thing was absolutely atrocious. So my recommendation is that you stay well away from this movie. I'm giving this a 0.5 out of 5 rating. And the only reason I'm not giving this a 0 is because my rating system is based off the star ratings on Letterboxd, and the lowest you can go is to a 0.5. I don't think I've rated a movie a 0.5 in a long time. And if I could have given this a 0, I would have. I hope you've enjoyed my review of Jeepers Creepers Reborn and that I've encouraged you to save your hard-earned for literally anything else. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.